Hi, everyone.
Hi, Jason.
I guess we'll just start. I'm assuming I'm being recorded. If I'm not being recorded, this is a memory that only we will share and which you can lord over both people who decided not to attend and people who stayed up in their room thinking, oh, surely this is more of the same crap. All right, well, so the name of the talk is the terrific machine. And the reason I'm giving this talk is because when I last attended KFest a year ago, I mentioned how I was doing this whole thing with Archive.org and get involved. And by the way, I'm going to copy all software ever created and hop in. It's going to be awesome. And so I thought, a year later, I'm coming in. I should really kind of give an update as to how that project is going. When I had talked to you last year, I had just joined the archive as an employee. I'm glad to say they have not fired me yet. In the interim time, since then, I have personally uploaded 165 terabytes of data into the archive. This includes a lot of stored stuff from the archive team, but it also includes acquired material from a whole other variety of locations. As a result, my scale knowledge is way off because I will encounter something and be like, oh, this is 3 gig. Yeah, okay. I guess we'll put it in. But what I've been up to over the course of the last year has been to make a stand to say that there's material that a library, an online library like Archive.org, should be able to provide to people like a library. And if people have a problem with it, let's just get it out there instead of, being worried or not doing it or doing it wrong or putting in some sort of bizarre fig leaf description of what people think law is. So for the past year, like I said, I've been uploading like crazy. I was going to do a screencast and show you a few things, but we seem to be having a little bit of weirdness with the screencast. So sufficient to say, for instance, when I started out with arcade manuals, figuring that was a pretty low-hanging fruit. The arcade manuals is only about 400 up right now. I have about 4,000. I stopped doing it because I was trying to turn over to some other projects I was working on, but that seemed to go along pretty well. Then I started to work towards computer magazines. So there are now many thousands of issues of computer magazines on Archive.org. These are folk-scanned, archived magazines, many of which an Apple II person would recognize. So if I was to say, very quickly, check my list, and in many cases these are ones that are complete runs that somebody has scanned out of a labor of love. These are not using Archive.org's professional scanning because I don't think it's quite to there yet. It was more about getting it up. So, for instance, we still have that going on. 68 micro, 80 microcomputing, 8,000 plus magazine, analog computing magazine, Acorn, Ahoy, Amiga World, Amstrad, Antic. I'm still in the A's, Atari User, then down to Big K, Blip. So basically what you're looking at, and when I'm looking at, I mean you're looking at me looking at, is a whole variety of computer magazines that are then provided in such a way, you can't quite see it on there, but when you click on a given item, you bring up a screen, and on the screen you're now able to read it as if it was a document, scan in, move into it, download it, and look at it. So you can read it immediately to get the information. Now, this is already having an effect. I'm already getting letters from computer classes and colleges telling me they're using these computer magazines to send students on missions to find information or do research. I already find it being used in podcasts to double-check prices instantaneously, to double-check facts, so the computer history is becoming more accurate. And it's inspiring people who have collections of these magazines to contact me about sending them to me to eventually be scanned. So material that may or may not be scanned anywhere is being considered of value because this demonstrates value. So in terms of a mission-wise, it's working well for me. And I'm getting exotic stuff. Let me quickly grab this for you. Everyone's like, is that his bed? Yes, that is in fact his bed. So, and you're still here, right? I'm not alone.
Yes. No.
Excellent. So, this came in the mail recently, and you're like, Jason, what could that possibly be?
Jason, what could that possibly be?
Microfiche.
Microfiche. And you can see this one. Nope, one moment. There we go. You probably can't quite read that. Personal Computing, Volume 6, Number 5, May 1982. 11 of 36. So this is where somebody bought, a nice person bought a piece of library furniture, that is to say a file cabinet, and the library said, do you want us to dump what's in it? And he was like, oh, what's in it? They're like, oh, microfiche. And so he checked with his son. His son knew of me, and the library sent me this package directly. Otherwise, this was just going to go. So it's, one of the advantages of having such a large collection up already was that it was starting to have this effect. People are starting to treat the stuff with value outside of just the scene. They're starting to recognize that there's a scene that wants this. So that's one of the motivations. Now, after computer magazines came computer newsletters. So a variety of people have worked on computer newsletter forums. And so I have been also uploading dozens and dozens and dozens of computer newsletters. Now, the thing with computer newsletters is that they tended to have rather short runs, 6, 8, 15 issues. So it's been a bit of a bear to put them all online and track them on. With the exception of something like Juice.gs, which seems like it's never going to die. There's a bunch of ones that are just going on for just absolute years. After computer magazines started to be added, and after I added newsletters, I started to move into software. Now, software has always been interesting. Archive.org did kind of really fell down on it, and they recognized this, that they really, they were concentrating on books and ephemera, and then they moved into movies and audio, but then they kind of didn't really focus on software. They did a single kind of a mirroring of two cows, and they kind of dropped it. They kind of left it. So I started them out on the easy thing, which was basically shareware. I have an enormous amount of shareware CDs. I can just reach over here. This is just like a small pack of something called PC Plus, which is basically a computer magazine cover disc, which means it has demos and everything else. But there's many of these things. At this point, the archive on archive.org has over 1,500 CD-ROMs, totaling in the hundreds of gigabytes. But it gets better. Again, I can't demonstrate it online, but it is possible, and we added this functionality this year at my request. You can say, you can reference the ISO of this thing, but then if you add a slash to the end of the ISO, it will give you a directory structure inside of the ISO and let you browse it. This means that sitting right now, there are over, by our estimate, 6 million shareware programs available on archive.org. So these range from everything from modern utilities all the way back to early user group collections. So, getting further, in the last few months, I was involved in a high-profile project, which I'm sure Tony has regaled you plenty of stories about, which was the transfer of the Prince of Persia source code. When I was brought in to do that, it was because Jordan Mechner mentioned he had found this disk, and people immediately said, you should go find Jason Scott, because there's this perception of me as some sort of super archiver who can suck data out of dead media for all of time. I don't mind this reputation because it makes people contact me and provide value to things that they otherwise wouldn't. You might not have heard of this. Again, I can't go how many here have heard of this, so I'm just going to barrel forward. But the IBM PC Junior Mule Rescue, which just happened this year, happened with them contacting me and saying, apparently this has value because you're the guy who rescued Prince of Persia, maybe you want this thing. It turns out there was a version of Mule for the IBM PC Junior that came out just at the end of the life of the PC Junior when IBM, in a desperate move, tried to kind of press some games into play, and basically only a few copies ever got out and it disappeared. And this guy had a new in wrapper copy. So it actually ended up not being me who did it. What ended up happening was that because this person saw the value and contacted me, somebody else contacted him as well. They ended up mailing this guy an IBM PC Junior with a program preloaded to stick in the disk, do the backup, pull it out, because at this point the guy didn't want to leave his house and he lived nowhere. So that program has been saved. People can now play it. They can try it. And then when it went up, this caused the original programmer who ported it to come out of the woodwork and go, oh yeah, I worked on that, and answer a ton of questions about what he was doing with the mode. Similarly, when we did the Prince of Persia rescue, Roland Gustafson, who was the creator of the 18 sector format that Broderbund was using at the time, he came out of the woodwork loaded with information. He'd just been sitting there like kind of like a unpicked fruit, just hanging, waiting to be acknowledged that he had done something cool. And I watched him hop into chat sessions. I watched him go into Metafilter and start posting, responses to people. And then he worked to pull that data out. So part of how we did it these days, just in case that's not been discussed, is so with the you might recognize one of these things. So this is a pretty standard 5.25-inch drive that goes with a PC. And one of the advantages of this thing is that with modification, it can read anything. The thing that it does not read, believe me, I have spent more time with technical geeks arguing about what about this, than I ever want to in my entire life. But if you look closely at the blue part after I focus, so if you see this focus here, this thing, and then it kind of moves along over to here, this is how they got flippy disks to work. They basically added a new index hole reader for me, modified it, and sent that to me in the mail so that it could be read. So there is modification that needs to be done, but this is not tough technology. The hardest part is getting these disks in front of these machines and convincing people that what they have is of value. I use two different tools. I'll just quickly show them. The one that's kind of famous is the CryoFlux. So basically the CryoFlux has a 5.25. Let's see if we can get a little more focus in here. There we go. So the CryoFlux has a little power supply, but mostly what it has here is it has the connector that goes to the disk, and then it goes to a USB. And then software basically makes it read off of the disk. And this will read, I mean, everything. I have seen people use it for Shugart disks. People have used it to read synthesizer disks to get their old patches from their old band in the 1980s back onto and off of synthesizer disks. It has a read-write function, which is important to some people. I think of this more like a safety, like a lifeboat, leaving a sinking ship. But obviously, for some people, they're having a lot of fun on the sinking ship, so they want to go back. So it'll do it. The other one, which is still being worked on, is the disk ferret. So this is the prototype board which I was sent, which can read just as well. The reason that anyone would even care that there were two of these things is because this one has proprietary components, this one has none. Unfortunately, this one's a little bit behind the other. I would like to see more of the open one win, because these guys can be a little bit involved, because they want to control the dissemination, and they're very picky, and I realize that, it's a business, but this is about just getting the information out there. Regardless, it's the same floppy. You can use it in both. So to me, what's important is that we're getting the stuff off of these floppies. I wrote a somewhat sensationalist article called Floppy Disks, It's Too Late, and it mostly got to convince people that this was a good idea. By the way, just because I had it here and I thought it would amuse you, just, again, I like putting things a little bit in perspective. Other people are like this too. This is a connector which connects to a Commodore PET. It actually connects in through that and the cassette port, and basically will let a PET read and write off of SD and other things, as well as output serial a different way. So somebody hacked that. And then there's this lovely thing, which comes in this beautiful package, as you can see, which is basically a sock. And this is the Retrode. So it says Retrode. What it is, it's a Nintendo and Sega Genesis cartridge reader that you plug in so your emulators can run off the original cartridge instead of a ROM image. Why? I don't know. Take it up with Retrode, but it's pretty awesome. In other words, it can sometimes feel a little lonely out there in the retro world, where other people seem to be saying, oh, there's not many of you, but the fact is that there is a lot of work being done. We've seen that from the community, and the fact is that, for me, Archive.org is the place to store at least a copy of it. You know, they have several layers, right? Once something goes into the archive, it never gets deleted. The first week I worked there, I deleted something, and it took 3 admins to undo it and undo the damage I caused, because it wasn't built to actually be deleted. What they have instead are layers of accessibility, because it turns out most people don't want something to not exist. They just want it, it's not the first thing that shows up to their name on Google. So there's public, which is where it shows up in search engines. There's not showing up in search engines. There is not accessible to the public, but listed as being kept. And then there's not listed as existing, but it's being kept, along with a note saying how many years. There's an even more extreme version where it is encrypted with a password that only the person keeping it knows, with the theory being that either they can unlock it, or over the course of time, people will be able to crack through the encryption. So they've thought this out about how are we going to store it. So if things are taken offline, they're taken away, but they're not deleted. And I think that kind of permeates that organization and really shows how dedicated they are to being the center of data being accessible for a long time to come. They make their URLs to be very universal. They make it to be very permanent, and also keep duplicates in multiple locations and everything else. I've just been so impressed. So now, what can you do? So there's several possibilities. I believe rare items, items that are believed to be one-offs that can be scanned. There's a home for them. I've got people scanning in TIFFs, people scanning in materials. I just recently had, again, I can't see you, but I don't know how many people might be aware of the name Hot Rod of the Midwest Pirates, of the 1200 Club and the Black Bag Society. Well, he just recently contacted me, and he was able to, through this technology, read his floppies, and he has given me several hundred written text files that are going up on textfiles.com that just simply don't exist anywhere else. Many of them are soft docs or whatever, but some of them are just actual writings, reports, essays, historically. And it was because he was inspired by both the existence of the Apple II community and by the work being done at the archive to make this stuff available once more. You can upload stuff to them via FTP. You can contact me. I have been a liaison for many people who don't want to deal with the archive.org interface, and we work to make collections together to put things up. And I'm Jason at textfiles.com, or if you want to be legit, jscott, JSCOTT at archive.org if you want proof I work there. There's a thing called an S3 interface, and I don't require you to know any about this. What it translates to is there is a way to programmatically add new data. This means that I can take 1,000th of an item, and I have a script, and it will shove them in. I was able to upload 680,000 music tracks in 1 week for a project where we brought back a dormant music site called the Internet Underground Music Archive. 45,000 artists, 680,000 pieces of music. And I didn't have to be there for it. It just quietly worked. So if you have collections of things, don't be like, well, there's a lot of it, it's going to take forever. We can deal with it. So I'm happy to discuss what we're up to and the situation, but I want to say that, the Apple II community has a friend at the archive. They have a friend, the archive is a friend as well, but they've got me as well. I want to save it just like I'm saving all the rest of this history in any way possible to ensure that anybody who needs information, needs stuff, has a neutral, library-oriented, it's registered as a library in California, and it's recognized nationally as a library, non-profit, no ads, infinite bandwidth, infinite disk space location. So, I said some of this last year, and it turns out it's pretty accurate. So I look forward, hopefully, to working with some of you online or off, and I do promise I will be at KansasFest next year to record you for the documentary I'm working on called 6502, which, again, it's just because I got really busy. I was home 3 days in the last 2 months, and so I was going to die. And so I had to work this week on this location because I'm going away again for a week and a half to film a documentary that's going to require 20 hours a day for 5 straight days, which I am not looking forward to. Anyway, so that's my both presentation and pitch, and I'll happily answer any kind of questions anyone has about this.
David? And remember, Jason, if you can repeat the question.
Of course, I love repeating questions. Does this make things, does seeing me this well make things better or worse?
Way better.
Go ahead, David.
Jason, what was that number you gave about how many terabytes you've uploaded at archive.org?
Okay, what I gave you, I believe, it's 117 terabytes. So 171,000 gigabytes.
Wow.
Yeah. A lot of data. Archive team in total has uploaded something in the order of 300 terabytes. And as a result, we are 20% or 25% of all uploaded data to archive.org in the last year. This is going to result in a Kickstarter because I am costing them significant cash. And so we're going to do a little fundraising for this nonprofit just as a way. I mean, he hasn't really brought it up, but I feel that we should make an effort to do this. So I'm going to probably try to put together some sort of Kickstarter this year. I just have to work it out with them because this may be one of the few Kickstarters where you can actually write off most of what you donate. Because it's a nonprofit, we just have to figure out how that all works.
I have a question.
Sure.
Archive.org is a great place to store data. How easy is it to discover the data once it's in there?
It is terrible. It's designed very flat hierarchy. It tends to be things like movies, media type, collection, and and then collection name, and then item. And the fact is that I don't think that's going to come from within in terms of a true, proper discovery. My hope is that first, get the stuff up there, and then there's a layer of trying to, the advantage though is that, like some sort of terrible stack, everything in there is properly in there. Everything is like in a permanent URL. It would be archive.org/details/item. That will always work, even though there's machines moving the data around and all sorts of things. So that's good, because if somebody writes something that does discovery, or if people provide things to archive.org that help discovery, I'm not saying it's hard to get things out. It is infinitely easy to get things out. Archive.org is one of the few hosting sites in the world, really, that will always make available, first and foremost, the original thing that was being uploaded. You don't get some crappy MP4 of your original beautiful AVI that has been re-rendered 16 times, unless you want to. You can get the original one off. So same thing with the ISOs. Same things with the zips, with everything that's uploaded. So you can always get that. But I think that archive.org has never really focused on making it really easy to kind of explore it. They're too busy saving the world to set up a tour. And so one of the things that I have been doing is trying to interface with a number of people to make iPad applications or to make website remixes, because they encourage remixing. And we're probably going to talk about some sort of a hackathon to kind of get things started in that direction so that you'll be able to do it. So the answer is, it's terrible for just like, I'm going to browse, like say Amazon. It's not going to go, people who browse this, they want to. There was an experiment to do a social media version where you go in and it says your friends tend to read these things. Your friends are awful. But it doesn't have it yet, and I want to see it happen. But I will not oversell that. It's something that needs to be done.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Next question.
George.
Have you been contacted by entities that want material removed, and how do you handle that?
My favorite question. Let's see. Of the roughly 500 magazine titles and newsletter titles that I've uploaded, 2 have been taken down. No, 3, my apologies, 3. In all 3 cases, it turned out they were a still sold product. That is to say, one turned out to be, even though it wasn't online, it was a 1970s gaming magazine that had gone out of print, but it got revived in 2000s, and one of the things they offered for people who bought a subscription and got a user account was you could browse them online on a locked wall garden. So they said, "You please remove it," and we, again, did not delete it, we just made it not publicly accessible on the internet.
So it's
2 other items were this: they were selling $150 CD-ROMs of the scanned images that asked us to take them down. With the music, for instance, of those 45,000 bands, 6 requested removal. In almost every single case, it is a guy with title like sustainability manager or director of HR saying, "Please take this down." And you go look, and he's the guitarist of a punk band from 1992. So it's been kind of like that. I think it's an extremely small percentage because, again, we every time you click on archive.org, a few pennies get pulled out of its pocket. It is not going to barrage you with ads or monetize what you're giving it. And I think that protects it from a lot of people who perceive other such entities, when you'll have a guy who puts up 45 scanned magazines and then he's got some AdWords for hosting. This is not working that way at all. And it seems to have protected them very well over the last 15 years.
Any other questions?
Any other questions?
You go.
Well, thank you, Jason.